We are back here now on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast to dive back into a familiar topic, the Dallas Cowboys. Any movements on the negotiations so far? No, not too big of a surprise. Nothing's really moved other than the fact that Jerry is talking a little bit more about the deal, but not too much movement being made on the deal. Basically, yesterday, Dallas owner Jerry Jones spoke to some of the media in the lead up to their preseason game on Sunday, and still no sign of progress with CeeDee Lamb, especially. That seems to be the more urgent one. I say that just because CeeDee's not there. I know Dak's obviously the quarterback, and everybody wants that deal to get done first, but CeeDee's actually not there, holding out, making a bigger fuss out of this than the quarterback is. So to me, that one feels a little bit more significant, but not in Jerry Jones' eyes, pretty clearly, because he was asked about, any sense of urgency in getting that done. We are now getting closer to the regular season, starting preseason this weekend. There could be some more urgency, you'd think, logically there for the Cowboys, to kind of get it together, right? Your main star isn't there, and you're really not showing any signs of improving that situation or making it desirable for him to actually be there. So they asked Jerry Jones about it, and he pretty simply said on CeeDee Lamb and the urgency, he said, "I don't have a sense of urgency about getting it done. Give any reason you want." That's pretty much all he said on that. And he also added that he feels that they are making progress regardless of what everybody else thinks. But the thing that I found interesting was he said, "I don't expect to not have CeeDee Lamb at the start of this season or in this season overall," which is kind of contradicting to me, almost, dare I say, a little arrogant, almost overconfident in a way, and I'll explain that in just a second. But that comment that he made, saying, "I don't have a sense of urgency about getting it done," CeeDee Lamb responded to that pretty directly on Twitter through his account, reposting and responding to that statement. In that Twitter statement, just responding with a simple LOL on Twitter. You guys could probably go find it somewhere. It's almost everywhere. If you search it up on the app or just anywhere on the internet, you're sure to find it on there. So, short response, but it feels like it says a lot. It says a lot on how CeeDee's feeling about the situation, how the Cowboys are approaching it. And it's ironic that he said LOL, because this entire thing, to me, is almost, becoming like a big joke. It's almost becoming like a big joke, like the Cowboys are sort of just messing with everybody, having almost this careless, carefree attitude. And I think it's almost borderline embarrassing up until this point, figuring it out, or not being able to figure it out with their star players like Dak and CeeDee. And I know I make it sound easier than it obviously is, but it's not like this just became an issue this offseason. They knew that this was coming down the pipe. They could have figured out something last year with CeeDee, maybe in a more ideal market where he didn't have that historic season, so you could have maybe offered him a little bit more, and the wide receiver market wasn't anywhere where it was right now. But because you decided to wait, not only is Dak going to get a lot more money, also because the quarterback market has exploded as well, but also now you have a receiver that has put up the resume and the numbers to be paid like a Justin, like an AJ, like an Amon-Ra St. Brown. You almost have no other option to pay both of those guys. And right now, nothing's being done about it. And the fact that Jerry felt the urge to say something like that, I think we could all agree that it's completely fine to feel annoyed by it, to feel like you almost don't have to answer this question for probably the 30th time over the last 2 weeks. But I feel like we could all agree that this probably just could have been kept to himself. He didn't need to say it. But I feel like this is just an over happening, just an over appearing theme with the Cowboys. They always, not just on the field and how this whole narrative is built around the Cowboys about how everything that can go wrong will go wrong. That is applied to, I guess, the playoffs and things like that. I don't pay too much attention to that, but it's hard to not pay attention to it when they really just shoot themselves in the foot like this. We talked about it before in weeks prior in that situation with Malik Hooker and Micah. Things that can be kept in the locker room, things that should be kept to a personal level, are a lot of times just aired out. And I don't know if it's has to do with the media just always being around that team at all times and how something just gets out. But most of the time they say it with pretty with a pretty with some conviction in their voice, and it almost seems like they don't think twice about saying something like this. And again, it could be how they feel, but it just doesn't need to be said at the end of the day. And then with you saying something like that, you get a response from CeeDee, and not only is is he going to remember that, it does play an effect into how this whole thing gets panned out, because not only are you not getting anything done, it seems like you're now almost just swatting it away, not really thinking about it, not giving it the attention that it deserves. And that obviously affects the production on the field, and that's where Emmitt Smith comes in. They asked him about the contract situations with Dak and CeeDee, and he wasn't a big fan of how this whole thing was being played out, obviously. Basically, the main thing that he wanted to mention was that CeeDee and Dak, obviously a symbiotic relationship. I hope I used that term right. It sounds right, because obviously Dak had a great season in major part with CeeDee having a great season, and vice versa. Dak has a great season and CeeDee benefits from it. CeeDee has one and Dak benefits off of it as well. They both look great based off of the other's production and how great they looked last year. So what Emmitt Smith was basically saying is that if you go out and say you re-sign Dak Prescott, that's great, but now that you might not be showing the urgency that it needs to be going to CeeDee Lamb, it's going to put more pressure on Dak. And it's great that you re-signed him, but if you don't have that go-to guy out there, and the options after CeeDee Lamb for the Cowboys aren't that great either. So if you have Brandon Cooks, no shade to Brandon Cooks, but if you have him as your leading receiver, then guys like Jalen Tolbert, and honestly, I don't know off the top of my head who else they have at receiver, but it's not CeeDee Lamb. So if you do re-sign Dak, you get all this money to him, deserved, you could say, after last year, but you don't support him with the necessary weapons. And on top of that, now Dak is put in a position where people are going to judge him unfairly because he's been given this money. People expect him to perform, but a lot of people don't think about the context of CeeDee Lamb probably not being there, and they're just going to look at Dak and point out all the mistakes he makes because his receivers aren't what he's used to. He doesn't have a connection with those guys to the level of CeeDee Lamb, and he's going to get killed in the media. The national news is probably just going to go on about how Dak doesn't deserve this contract, where in reality, the Cowboys really just haven't planned this thing out very well at all, and one affects the other. Same thing with CeeDee. If they extend him, if they don't extend Dak, yeah, Dak's probably going to play because he hasn't been holding out, but it's only going to be for one more year, and the rest of the team also, the same thing applies. They're not that great. They haven't gotten better around their stars, so it's probably going to end up in the same way it has over the last few years. And the Cowboys, ironically, with Jerry Jones saying he hasn't shown or doesn't feel any urgency to extend Dak, it also feels like he doesn't show any urgency or doesn't want to show any urgency in trying to win more playoff games and trying to improve the product on the field. So it lines up with this carefree attitude, I guess you could say, with not only CeeDee, but with this entire thing. And if also you compare it to the Minnesota Vikings and how they reset the market with Justin Jefferson, they didn't have to deal with a quarterback extension. They figured that out pretty early, moving on from Kirk and not paying him all that money. So the decision was made a little bit easier. They handled it a little bit better. So they didn't have to figure out that simultaneously with their wide receiver. But either way, they still had to deal with paying one of their biggest stars at the wide receiver position. And the way that they talked about Justin Jefferson and wanting to get this done, making it a priority and everything like that, you look at a similar situation where CeeDee is in a similar spot to wanting to get paid that much, earning that contract, and the owner is saying that, if it happens, it happens, basically. There's no urgency there. We'll see where we're at. And again, feeling overconfident that CeeDee's just going to show up in the regular season. Yeah, you could say he's obligated to be there because he's under contract, but he hasn't shown up at all. He hasn't been seen at that facility since the end of last year. So to say that you expect him to be there when it matters during the regular season on a contract that really offers him no guarantees is a little insane to me. not only to think that, but to actually say it out loud. And people, again, like you could imagine, are going to run with it. And CeeDee has obviously seen it. And there is this wild idea that this could all be sort of a sarcastic thing, an intentional lie. Maybe they know something, maybe they have something agreed that they're just not sharing, and they're saying these stuff just to sort of annoy the media or just make up these wild stories. But either way, it doesn't paint them in the right image, and it just makes them look bad, and it just shines a bigger light on how this is all really just a big mess at the end of the day. And the Cowboys are trying to get better, like most teams in this time of year, with the preseason, with the training camp. And I know their stars aren't going to play at this time, obviously, but we are getting closer to that regular season. And like, unlike other situations, this has been kept pretty quiet. And usually when news breaks for the Dallas Cowboys, nothing is ever kept quiet, obviously, with the amount of media that is there. So you can assume that nothing is really happening, even though Jerry and Stephen Jones keep saying that they are feeling positive about it. I have my doubts about it. I don't see any way that they can get both of them done, really, in the remaining time that we have. We're almost in the middle of August now, really almost in the thick of preseason. So if nothing happens right now, I wouldn't be surprised if CeeDee's not there to start the year. I don't think he'll cave in and just show up. I don't see any reason to do that. And then maybe that forces the Cowboys to do something similar to the Chiefs last year when Chris Jones didn't play in the first week and then he got his extension. Maybe that's what it's going to take for the Cowboys to be pushed over the limit to extend CeeDee Lamb. But the comments just in general didn't sit well with too many people, especially Emmitt Smith and obviously CeeDee Lamb. So not the way you'd want to progress these contract negotiations, but the Cowboys do things their own way. So hopefully it works out for them. There's a lot of pressure on them, as there always is. So we'll see how it turns out. This season could go very badly if this isn't worked out, but we'll see. We'll update it as we go on through the the preseason, offseason, I should say. But that'll be that segment. We have some more to get to on today's show. The ones that I didn't mention are talking about the Falcons and Kirk Cousins. He brought up Kyle Pitts and working with him throughout this entire offseason, and how my question is, will Kyle Pitts be the biggest benefactor of Kirk Cousins joining this squad? And also we're going to get to continuing the series of the biggest remaining questions across all NFL divisions. We're going to stop by the NFC South and talk about all those teams and the questions they yet still have to answer, plus some more coming in the tail end of this episode. So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.